The biting cold wind of a San Francisco winter whipped through the city streets. Jack, a homeless man, pulled his tattered coat tighter around his shoulders as he shuffled through the dark alleys. His feet ached from walking the uneven pavement all day, and his stomach growled from hunger. Each gust of wind felt like knives cutting into his skin. He needed shelter, just one night of rest away from the unforgiving elements. The city was familiar to Jack, yet so vast that he always found himself in new, forgotten corners. Tonight, he wandered into a part of town he didn't recognize, where the buildings were old, decrepit, and seemingly abandoned. That's when he saw it, a large, Victorian house at the end of a cul-de-sac. It stood like a ghost, towering over the street, with broken windows and peeling paint. But it was shelter. Jack didn't care how run down it was, all that mattered was that it looked empty and it might provide warmth for the night. He approached the front door, which hung slightly ajar, groaning as he pushed it open. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and neglect. Jack stepped in, his footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath his weight, and cobwebs clung to the corners of the rooms. He wandered from room to room, glancing at the peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. It looked as though no one had been there for decades. After finding an old, moth-eaten blanket in one of the upstairs rooms, Jack decided to settle down in a small room on the second floor. It had a single window that rattled in the wind, offering a narrow view of the dimly lit street below. He lay down on the cold floor, wrapping the blanket around himself. His eyes were heavy from exhaustion, and soon, sleep took him. But sleep would not offer the rest he had hoped for. Sometime in the dead of night, Jack was jolted awake by a sound, something faint, but distinct. A whisper. He sat up, his breath visible in the cold air. The room was dark, except for the dim moonlight streaming through the window. His heart raced as he listened closely, straining to hear. There it was again, a soft whisper, like someone muttering just outside the room. His eyes darted to the door, but it was closed. He stood up, his legs shaky, and walked toward the door, pressing his ear against the cold wood. Nothing. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. It's just the wind, he thought. Old houses make noises, and his mind was probably playing tricks on him. Jack returned to his spot on the floor and tried to sleep again, but no sooner had he closed his eyes than he heard it again, this time louder. A raspy, menacing voice, right behind him. Get out. Jack froze, his blood turning to ice. He didn't dare turn around. Every hair on his body stood on end. His mind raced. Was someone in the house? His breath quickened, and his chest tightened with fear. He slowly turned his head, scanning the room. Nothing. The room was empty. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped even further. His breath came out in thick clouds, and frost began to form on the window. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as the whispering grew louder, now unmistakable. It wasn't just one voice, it was a chorus of whispers, overlapping and growing more frenzied with each passing second. He shot up, wide-eyed, and stumbled toward the door, yanking it open. The hallway was pitch black, but he didn't care. He needed to get out of this house. He rushed down the stairs, his feet barely touching the steps, when something cold and sharp grazed the back of his neck. Jack screamed, tripping on the last step and crashing to the floor. He scrambled to his feet, clutching his neck. His hand came away slick with blood. He spun around, his eyes wild with terror. At the top of the stairs stood a figure, a shadowy, twisted shape that seemed to writhe and shift in the darkness. Its eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, locked onto Jack. The whispers intensified, filling the house with a deafening roar. The figure began to descend the stairs, each step deliberate and slow, as if savoring the fear radiating from Jack. He stumbled backward, his mind reeling. What the hell was this thing? His pulse thundered in his ears as he bolted toward the front door. But just as his hand reached the doorknob, it slammed shut on its own with a deafening bang. The walls of the house seemed to groan, and the whispers grew into a cacophony of tortured voices. Jack turned, his back pressed against the door, his eyes darting around the room in panic. The figure was gone from the stairs. He blinked, disoriented, his breathing shallow. His eyes scanned the darkness, searching for any sign of the spirit. And then, it was behind him. A cold, skeletal hand clamped down on his shoulder, its fingers like iron claws digging into his flesh. Jack screamed in agony as the claws raked down his back, tearing through his clothes and skin. He collapsed to the floor, writhing in pain as blood pooled beneath him. The whispers now seemed to come from every direction. Faces appeared in the walls, twisted, tormented faces with hollow eyes and gaping mouths, all of them screaming silently at him. Jack's vision blurred, his mind on the verge of breaking as the figure loomed over him. The spirit spoke, its voice a guttural rasp that cut through the chaos. "You do not belong here, this is my house." Jack tried to crawl away, but the spirit grabbed him by the ankle, dragging him across the floor with inhuman strength. He clawed at the floorboards, his nails breaking as he screamed in terror. The spirit's icy breath was on his neck, and Jack could feel its presence growing heavier, darker. "Leave!" It hissed, its voice shaking the very walls of the house. But Jack couldn't leave. He was trapped. In one final act of desperation, Jack forced himself up, ignoring the searing pain in his back, and threw himself toward the nearest window. The glass shattered as he crashed through it, tumbling out into the cold night air. He landed hard on the pavement outside, the sharp edges of the broken glass cutting into his skin. His chest heaved as he lay there, staring up at the house. The whispers finally stopped, and the air grew still. He dared to glance back at the broken window, half expecting the spirit to follow him. But the window was empty now, just an open, broken frame. The house loomed over him in silence, as if nothing had happened. Jack staggered to his feet, bleeding and broken, and limped away from the house as fast as his legs would carry him. He didn't look back. He wouldn't survive another night in that place. As he disappeared into the night, the whispers resumed inside the house, their soft, chilling tones echoing through the empty rooms. The spirit lingered in the shadows, waiting for the next unfortunate soul who would dare seek shelter in its haunted home.